It's over. We are screwed.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Around the Jungle. My name's Evan. I'm here with Zach. And as most of you know, it has been a gloomy time for Bengals fans as Joe Burrow once again is injured and will likely be out for a minimum of 3 months. That's being optimistic. Realistically, it'll probably be the rest of the season with a turf toe injury that he sustained against the Jags on Sunday. And so we're going to talk about, obviously, the injury, how the Bengals are going to look without him, the outlook of Joe Burrow long term, and just stuff like that. So first, I want to read what turf toe is because I'm not a medical genius, and so it doesn't sound that bad, but it actually is extremely painful when you look into it. So basically, turf toe is tissues on the underside of your big toe are torn. And it basically means like you can't run, you can't walk, you really can't do much on that foot. And so obviously as a quarterback and an athlete, that is not good. And so usually the timetable is like 4 to 6 weeks, but of course Joe Burrow has the highest grade turf toe injury, which will require surgery because that's just his luck and Bengals luck. So yeah, Zach, how do you think the Bengals will fare without him, and what are your thoughts on the whole situation surrounding Burrow and all these injuries?
Well, first of all, I would just agree with you, of course, that he would have the worst case scenario of this type of injury. Like, what else would you expect? Worst case, obviously. So, when I saw it happen on Sunday, I didn't even know what happened. Like, the play looked perfectly fine. Tackle was clean. I really have no idea what happened there. But then, of course, out of a seemingly perfectly fine, clean, no issue tackle would come, in my opinion, was probably going to be a season-ending injury for Joe Burrow. So yeah, pretty unfortunate. I think that he's just, it's kind of a bit of he's made of glass, but on the same hand, he has just his body has sustained such a toll of hits over the course of his NFL career that crap like this, it's just inevitable. I feel like, every other season he's basically out for the year. So you had a really good one last year, and now this year he's out. So maybe next year will be a really good year for him again. I don't know, but I just think that it's just starting to pile up for his body, and this is kind of just what happens. I think he's 29 years old. Not saying he's old. Tom Brady played till he was 45. Aaron Rodgers is like 41. So he's not old for the quarterback position, but he is 29, and he's taken more hits than Andrew Luck has taken at the same point in their careers. So yeah, I think it's just kind of it's just piling up, and it's unfortunate. Um, but yeah, he's taken a lot of hits, and his body seems to be made of glass already, so it's kind of unfortunate. But as for how the Bengals fare, I don't think they fared well. By somehow we're 2-0. Wouldn't expect that because I think I actually had us starting out like 0-5 or something like that, didn't I?
Something like that.
So yeah, I definitely did not expect 2-0. But yeah, obviously I don't think we fare well. Joe Burrow, when he's healthy, is the second best quarterback in the NFL behind Mahomes. And so obviously there's a significant drop off between Burrow and Browning. So I don't think we fare well. I mean, Jake Browning is he's a pretty decent backup. He's a solid quarterback, but he's not Joe Burrow. So I don't think I don't really I don't know. It's tough to say. Are we going to win a Super Bowl without Joe Burrow? Absolutely not. Can we make the playoffs still? I don't think it's out of the question, personally. I don't think it's completely out of the question because I think Jake Browning is pretty solid. 2 years ago, on Burrow's last season-ending injury, we went 9-8 with another terrible defense, and we were somewhat in the playoff discussion, I believe. And Jake Browning played for, I want to say he played for over half of the season, or at least he played for the back half of the season that year. So I think Jake Browning's decent. Obviously, we still have all the same weapons that Joe Burrow has. So, I mean, I don't I don't think playoffs are totally out of the question. Super Bowl, 100%. We're not winning a Super Bowl without him. Playoffs, I don't think it's totally out of the question, but it is very unlikely, I would say. Um, so yeah. In my opinion, that's the outlook. Um, Playoffs aren't out of the discussion. Very unlikely. We're not winning a Super Bowl. Um, I don't know. That's my opinion on the situation. But I did also saw an interesting stat today though. Was It was Joe Burrow, or it was our offensive lines like pass protection win percentage, or whatever metric that is. It was our offensive lines metric with Joe Burrow, and then it showed our offensive line's metric without Joe Burrow, Jake Browning season, and then for the rest of the Jags game from this past weekend without Joe Burrow. And interestingly enough, our offensive line's pass protection is, I don't want to say significantly, but our offensive line's pass protection is decently better without Joe Burrow. Interestingly enough, if you look at the metrics, I saw the stat today. Our offensive line is decently better without Joe Burrow than with Joe Burrow. I don't. I, that's an interesting metric I saw today. Um, might be a little bit of hope because of that. But and to be honest with you, I think it's because without Joe Burrow, I think that Zach Taylor simplifies the offense. If I had to guess, things are things are definitely a lot more simpler. Things are easier with Jake Browning in there. So I don't know. That might mean that our offensive line play improves, which would be great. So I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting thing to consider. Interesting thing to look at when you
That
talk
is
about,
very interesting.
yeah. You can fact check me on that too, but I saw it today. And
I think I heard the same thing as well.
yeah, so I
Um,
mean, you can consider that when you're talking about the long-term outlook of the rest of the season here, but I mean, I don't know, take it how you will, but our offensive line plays better without Joe Burrow. So, I don't know.
that is weird because it's not like Joe, takes forever to get the ball out. He's one of the fastest to get the ball out in the league because of, he's always getting pressured. But
Yeah.
one argument that I've seen is, that, I mean, we're in shotgun probably 98% of the time, 99% of the time. So
Probably, yeah.
some people, contribute that to it, which could be a reason. Um, but obviously, it just sucks. It really sucks. It's unfortunate. It's disappointing. Like you said, it feels like every other year now where Joe has a significant injury. His rookie year he tore his ACL. And then he played back-to-back healthy seasons in 21 and 22. 23 had the wrist, 24 was healthy, and now 25 has the toe. And so it's like, I mean, we were saying this all last year, is you have to take advantage of the seasons where Joe Burrow's healthy because they're not guaranteed. And unfortunately, that is showing right now.
We egregiously wasted an MVP season.
Yeah, but it really just sucks because, like you said, when Burrow's playing, he's one of the best in the world. And when he's out, obviously the media always just, bashes the Bengals because that's what they love doing. And so it just sucks, because you don't want to see anybody go through that, and especially not your franchise player. But I think Jake Browning is, a pretty good backup. A lot of people say that he's one of like the best backups in the league. I read somebody said that he could start over a couple of current starting quarterbacks, which is an interesting thought.
I
But
don't
yeah,
hate that. I think he's decent.
yeah, I think he's decent too. But yeah, in 2023, he was 4-3 in games that he played. And he finished, we finished the season with a 9-8 record. So he was pretty good. He had some big wins in there. I think he beat the Jags, beat the Vikings, almost beat the Chiefs. Um, so there's some good games in there. And so I think that the franchise and the organization, the coaching staff has confidence in him. Obviously, he's not Joe Burrow, and the offense isn't going to be as good as Joe Burrow. But like you said, you still have, Jamar T, Chase Brown, all those guys on offense. But the thing that's weird to me and interesting to me is, you've harped on this for forever, and everyone else has, is, the I guess the front office being unwilling or just not improving the offensive line over the years. But I look on this offensive line on paper, and you have Orlando Brown at left tackle, who
Mhm,
was a Pro Bowl tackle, won Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs. And then you
mhm.
have Dylan Fairchild at left guard, who is a rookie, but he was one of the highest graded blocking, like pass block rookies in college and in the preseason. At center, you have Ted Karras, who I think is solid and has, played a lot of games, and he's won a Super Bowl with the Patriots. And then right guard, you have Dalton Reisner, who was like top 5 in PFF grade last year. And then on the right side, on the right tackle, you have Amarius Mims, who showed a lot of promise last year and is a mammoth of a man. So it's just interesting to me that, I do feel like the Bengals have invested in the offensive line a little bit. Obviously, it's
Um,
night and day difference than what it was in 2021. I don't
yeah,
think anybody can argue that, but it still is interesting to me because on paper, you would look at this offensive line and you would probably say that this is the best offensive line that Joe Burrow has had in his career. And and it
probably. I mean, the only
on
argument you
paper
can
at
make.
least,
Yeah, I mean, even on paper, the only year that I think maybe could be an argument would be 2022,
22, yeah,
because that was, I mean, Alex Cappa was still playing at a decent level. That was when he just came from Tampa Bay off that Super Bowl with Brady. So, I mean, that's the only other year that you could argue, though. This is definitely a better line than he had last year and the Super Bowl year and his rookie year.
yeah. And it still, happens, and they talked to, James Rapine was interviewing Dalton Reisner on it because his guy was the guy who came by, and he said, he was beating himself up about it and stuff. But he said, we could have 99 plays where Joe doesn't get touched. And then the one play he gets touched is the one play he gets injured. And so that's just how football is, and it sucks.
Yeah.
Um, and so I do think that they have put in stuff in the offensive line. Obviously, I don't know if it's a coaching thing or not, but obviously the offensive line hasn't been good in recent years. No one's arguing that. I'm not arguing that. They were
Yeah.
one of the worst in the league last year, but I think the narrative that they just have sat with their hands tied behind their back and just paid all this money to weapons instead of getting offensive line, I think is a little bit misconstrued because I do think that they have invested, probably not as much as they should have, but
Yeah.
I think they have tried to work on it.
Yeah.
Um, but because I saw someone who was like, oh, all they do is draft weapons. And I looked it up. The last time that the Bengals drafted a wide receiver or running back in the first 2 rounds was when we drafted like when we drafted T. Higgins with Joe Burrow or Jamar Chase,
And yeah, Jamar.
and since then it's been defensive players, and then we got Chase Brown in the third and a couple of those guys in like the trenches, but we weren't spending like huge like day 1, day 2 picks on weapons, like
Yeah.
we were building out the defense. So it just sucks. I think that the Bengals obviously aren't going to be as good this year. Obviously, we didn't have extremely high expectations for them this year, but with them, starting off 2-0, there was a little bit of hope that, maybe they could have make it to the playoffs and maybe have a run, but without Joe, that doesn't seem very likely. I do think there is a chance that Browning does, kind of scrape by, and we do finish with a 9-8 record or whatever. And they haven't closed the door on Joe Burrow coming back. I think his projected, if the earliest, would be week 14. So we'd have to be in the playoff hunt by then, which may or may not happen. And even then, that's being extremely optimistic that he would be healthy by
Mhm.
then.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go into this thinking that Joe Burrow will not be playing for the rest of the year.
I think
Um,
that's a safer assumption, than rushing him back out there for week 14 when we may or may not be in the playoff picture.
yeah, which sucks because like this was really the first time that he's had a full healthy off season. He All the reports was that he was playing phenomenal in preseason,
Mhm.
and I mean in preseason I think he scored on almost every drive he was in,
Yeah, he
and
looked good in the preseason too.
yeah, so everything was pointing up, and of course this had to happen, which obviously sucks. But
Yeah.
um, but
I
yeah,
don't think
it's just terrible that it happened, and I
Yeah.
think that you know you could blame the organization, you could blame Zach Taylor. Um, I mean, injuries are part of the game, unfortunately, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's just happened a lot to Burrow. Um, and I don't like seeing him in the being compared to Andrew Luck. That's never good.
Yeah,
But
that really sucks.
I will say the one thing about Joe compared to Andrew Luck is yes, Joe's had three or is going to have, I mean, I guess two or three massive surgeries, but what did he do after those surgeries? After he tore his ACL his rookie season, he went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
After he tore ligaments in his wrist, he threw for 5,000 yards, almost 50 touchdowns. Like he was
Mhm.
unreal. And
Yeah.
so turf toe, like people have come back for this. Patrick Mahomes had turf toe a couple years back.
Devontae Adams had turf toe.
Yeah, and so this isn't as massive of an injury as
Yeah, not as the other 2 he had.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna be like, obviously the sacks and the pressure rates and the hits is not good, but the big thing with Andrew Luck is he had a lot of like shoulder issues, concussions, like stuff like
Yeah.
that, which really limits you from playing. But if we've seen anything from Burrow, when he gets hurt, he comes back the next season better than ever. So I
Mhm.
I don't think it's like, oh, he's gonna retire soon, or his outlook is like looking grim, because I mean we've seen it time and time again that he's came back stronger after these injuries. Now,
Mhm.
obviously, we don't want them to happen, but
Yeah.
I think everyone always just tries to pencil him in with Andrew Luck, but I don't think that conversation really is valid because he's came back better than ever from these
Yeah.
injuries and has really had no issues other than like we thought the wrist was going to be a massive issue because no one's ever had that, and he was completely fine. So
Yeah.
I think that narrative is more just a narrative for like clicks and views. But obviously,
Yeah.
the sacks, quarterback hits, all that stuff is never good.
Yeah. I I just go back to I think even when he does come back and he's healthy, I think everybody in this organization needs to just take a serious hard look at how we're doing things. I think I think the organization standpoint, the GM, the front office, the owners, I think they need to look at how they're spending their money, how they're doing deals. I think they need to look at the team organization. I think they need to look at that, okay? Because I I have learned even more than I've harped on this forever because I've I've harped on it for forever, okay? But I have learned and I have seen firsthand now from actually coaching football. Yes, I realize I'm not coaching in the NFL, but I have seen that if you do not have a good offensive line and a good defense, you will not win games. It does not matter how good your skill players are. You will not win football games without a good O line and a good defense. The offensive line and the defense is by far the most important positions in football. I mean, obviously, when you get to the NFL and you get to higher levels, yes, your quarterback is very important, obviously. But If you will not win games without an offensive line and a defense. You will not do it. I have seen it firsthand now. Now that I'm coaching, I have seen it firsthand, and I've harped on it a lot. So I think the front office needs to look at how they're doing deals. The scouting department, I think they need to look at how many scouts we have. We need to look at, are they doing their job well? I think the front office needs to look at how they're doing things. Yes, because we have drafted these positions of needs. They have not panned out. So either our scouting sucks, which I tend to lean more that way, or our coaching is not getting it done. I think the blame can fall on both, but I think our scouting department needs to be better. Okay. I think the coaches need to look at how they do things, right? So obviously our development is not great. We have spent on players on the offensive line and the defense, and they have not hit. So our development's not great. We need to step back and we need to look at how we do development. Like, how are we developing these players? How can we be better with this? Because obviously it's not getting it done the way we're doing it right now. And I think, to be honest with you, I think Zach Taylor and Dan Pitcher, the offensive line coach, and Joe Burrow, they need to sit down in the offseason and they need to seriously take a hard look at this offense, this offensive scheme, the offense as a whole, running scheme, passing scheme, the offense as a whole. They need to sit down and they need to take a really hard look at this offense, because if our offensive line is better without Joe Burrow, that's a serious problem. We already don't run the ball super well. That's a serious problem. We need to take a hard. I don't care that Burrow put 5,000 yards up last year. That's great. That's last season. The NFL, it's tough. It changes every week, especially every year. So, and and even though Burrow's putting up all these numbers, the offensive line still wasn't getting it done. The offensive line was like 31st or 32nd last year percentage wise. So even with him putting up these numbers, something is still not right. So, so I mean, something's got to change with this offense. Zach Taylor, Burrow himself, something's got to change. Okay. We have to run the ball better and we have to protect better. I don't know what, I don't know offensively what they do, but something's got to change. Because if our offensive line improves without Joe Burrow, that tells me that when the backup is put in, the offense simplifies. And when it simplifies, it's better. Okay. So that tells me that when Joe Burrow gets back in there, they need to take a hard look at what they're doing offensively. And in my opinion, I think they need to change what they're doing offensively, because, yeah, we're putting up all these passing numbers, but the O line sucks and we don't run the ball effectively. So I just, I think the whole franchise needs to take a step back and look at what they're doing and how they're doing things and reevaluate everything. Because, like I said, the front office, they don't get it done. The way we do business, it sucks. We've harped on it all season. The coaching staff and Joe Burrow, I think obviously has a big hand in our offensive scheme. They need to look at what we're doing, because obviously that is also not getting it done, at least at a good enough level. Because, I mean, I love that we've put up all these passing numbers. I love that Jamar won the Triple Crown. That's awesome. But guess what? We didn't make the playoffs, and our offensive line was still terrible, and we didn't run the ball quite as well. That's three things right there. So something has to change on the offensive standpoint. I'm not saying it has to be a whole overhaul and a completely different offense. I don't know, but something's got to change, I think, on the offensive and the coaching standpoint. I am more on that train now. Something's got to change. They have to change the way they do stuff. So I I think that, I think the Bengals is like a perfect storm of garbage. Like, I really do think that that's what it is, because the offensive, the front office sucks. Like, the front office and the way they do business sucks. But then on the same hand, I don't think that our coaching staff is being efficient enough with what our front office gives us. So I think that everybody in this franchise needs to just take a step back and reevaluate how we're doing things. And I think that would be the best course of action. Proceeding.
Yeah, I agree. Someone actually asked Zach that, and I want to show you what his response was to that.
When you think about this injury happening to Joe and another injury you guys are dealing with, that you have to organizationally start to rethink how you protect Joe and the way that you guys have gone about that.
It's unfortunate that this happened. But again, that's part of football, and that's what's going to happen. Guys are in the pocket, guys are moving around. I don't know how a turf toe injury fully happens, how you got to get hit or stepped on. I know that potentially he could have been clean for 99% of the game, and the one play is where this happens. And so I get it. I understand where people are going to come from. It's going to be very attacking of us and our style of play. That's got us to a Super Bowl and an AFC championship and 2 division titles and won a lot of games for us. So we're always evaluating how we can protect our players and put them in the best position possible. So I take accountability for that. And if people want to blame me for putting them in a position, I'm fine taking that. But we'll continue to put the best plan forward to put Jake in a great position to go help us beat Minnesota.
So basically, he's not going to do anything. Then is what I got out of that, pretty much.
Doesn't sound like it.
I just don't like. I don't agree with that answer because yeah, the way we play has got us to a Super Bowl and an AFC title and 2 division titles. It has, but it's also cost a Hall of Fame level quarterback 2 full seasons, pretty much. Another pending probably full season, dang near 200 sacks over what, basically 4 or 5 seasons he's played. And we haven't won a Super Bowl yet either. So keep that in mind too. We also haven't won the division for the last 2 or 3 years, so keep that in mind as well. So like something has to change. Like I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, obviously you don't want to change everything, willy-nilly and stuff, but yes, we've had success in the past, but stuff changes, and also look what that success has cost us. Like, we haven't even won a Super Bowl, and we've got 200 sacks, 3 season-ending injuries out of a Hall of Fame level quarterback. I mean, and he ain't even 30 yet, So I don't know. I just think that you've got to look and see how you're doing things. And especially, I think the most telling thing about that is the fact that the offensive line is better without Joe Burrow. Like that, when you don't have your starting quarterback in there, you're obviously dumbing stuff down. You're doing stuff differently. Maybe not even doing stuff differently. You're just dumbing stuff down and making things simpler. So obviously something needs to be looked at there. When your O-line is better with your starting with your backup than your starter, obviously something's not right. Like I just don't know if I don't know if I'd get behind that. I just think that something obviously has to be different, in my opinion.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting answer when I first saw that. But yeah, I would agree. I agree with you. I think that I hope that this is a wake-up call to the coaching staff in the front office that they need to do everything that they can to protect Joe because he is the future of this team. He is the president of this team. Without him, they will never be good. They will never be successful if he is not there. So I think that they need to take a long, hard look at how they run things organizationally and, from a scheme, play calling standpoint. Because yes, I mean, he's correct. It has led to success in the past, but like you said, at what cost?
Yeah.
You've stripped 3 years off of a guy who, like you said, is a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback. And he's in the conversation of Andrew Luck, who retired extremely early, and so you never want to put your quarterback in that type of situation. And I'm sure when Joe talks, he's not going to blame anybody. He's not going to do anything like that because that's just not the type of person he is. But I do think that this should be a wake up call that something has to change in that. There needs to be something new going forward in order to protect Joe Burrow as best as humanly possible. because you can't have every other season he's out for a year. You just can't win that.
That's not going to get it done.
Before we wrap up, let's talk about a positive. The Bengals are 2-0. That hasn't happened ever, I feel like. They barely beat the Browns off of, some luck, extreme fortune, extreme luck because the kicker sucks. And then, they did enough to beat the Jags. So, real quick, how do you think about, obviously we talked about, their, them going forward, but how do you feel about the Bengals being 2-0? I'm sure you never thought you would say that.
Well, it is shocking. Like I said, going into the season when we did our our season prediction for the Bengals on here, I think I had us at 0-5. So 2-0 is it's quite a welcome surprise. But yeah, I mean, there is positives here. I mean, I think good teams find a way to win, especially in ugly games. I think we found a way to win in one extremely ugly game with the Browns, and then the Jags was not super pretty either. I mean, our defense kind of didn't play super great, but I guess they stepped up when they needed to, which we did not have last year, so that's at least improvement. But yeah, good teams find a way to get it done. And even without Joe Burrow, we found a way to get it done. So, Jake Browning put together a heck of a drive there on 2-minute drill to score the game-winning touchdown. So I'm not saying we're a good team, but I think that there is definitely huge pluses out of these first two games. I mean, especially beside all that, I mean, we're 2-0. We're first place in the division right now. We're one of the few unbeaten teams left in the NFL. So, I mean, I think we're in a pretty good spot. I mean, especially with Joe Burrow being out for, if he does happen to come back around the week 14 mark, I mean, we're at least 2 games ahead. And this Sunday with the Vikings, they're playing who?
Carson Wentz.
Yeah. So I think that's a pretty winnable game as well. So, I mean, I think we're in a good spot right now. And I think that there are signs that we can be a decent team this season. Our defense has still not looked very good, but they have at least stepped up and made plays in the big moments when we needed them. And we did not have that last year. So I think that there is minor improvement throughout 2 weeks there. Offensively, we got a great, I mean, our skill room is one of the best in the league. And I think Jake Browning is decent enough to get it done. So I don't know. I think we're in a pretty good spot right now. We're atop the division. We've won 2 hard, ugly games. So I like where we're sitting so far. We have not looked as good and as sharp as I would like to see, but we have found a way to win in ugly games. I think early in the season, that's what it's a good thing to see. So I think that we're in a pretty decent spot right now.
Yeah, I mean, the whole Joe Burrow situation obviously puts a cloud over everything, but I do think it's a good feeling not to go into a must-win week 3.
Yeah, because we haven't had that in 3 years.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, good teams find ways to win, no matter how good they play. As long as you win the game, that's really all that matters. So the Bengals are 2-0, like you said, they're top of the division. And I do think that we have seen some improvement from the defense. Obviously, it's not perfect, and they're still, not good every single time. But like you said, they've stepped up in both games when we needed them to, and that wasn't a thing that happened last year. And I think the biggest thing is in 2 games, they have 4 interceptions, the secondary does, which I think that's a good sign that, the young guys are starting to improve. Jordan Battles, I think he's had 2 picks already this year. So
Yeah, he's had, I think, 2.
he's been pretty good. And yeah, so obviously, if Jake Browning can play how he did in 2023, and if he can play how he did that final drive, minus the 3 interceptions, I think that, I think the Bengals can, kind of string along and be like still in the race. And yeah, I think,
team.
yeah, and I think the Minnesota game, now that Carson Wentz is at quarterback, I think that is a winnable game. But of course, like obviously, we have our hardest stretch of games here, coming up, going against, the Lions, the
NFC
Broncos,
North.
and the Packers and stuff. So those will probably be, 3 or 4 losses. But I said if like let's say Joe comes back week 14, I think the best case scenario would be that we are that we would be 6-7, because that way, if we could win, if Joe can come back, we win 4 straight, we finish 10-7. That should put you in the playoffs. I think that's a realistic. I think they could go 6-7. I think that's a realistic possibility. But obviously, we'll see what happens. But obviously, I don't think that they're gonna make a playoff run or anything. But I think that the Bengals will at least be watchable. And I think that there could be some good games. Obviously, if Jake Browning can kind of repeat the magic that he had in 2023, I think that, we'll still be a team that's obviously you have to play well against. And hopefully, I think the biggest takeaway from this season will be that we see improvement from the defense. And if there is improvement from the defense when Joe comes back next year, hopefully that continues. And then, obviously, that would be a big plus. So obviously, the season looks a lot bleaker without Joe, but the Bengals are 2-0, and they very well could be 3-0 after this next week. So it's not all bad, but obviously
it's kind of a weird, like it's kind of a weird like situation, because it's like, okay, we are 2-0. There have been pluses in our 2 wins so far, but we are without our franchise quarterback. So it's like, it's kind of a weird situation,
Yeah, it is.
But I mean, I don't know. I think we'll see how the defense steps up, and Jake Browning, obviously. That's going to be the tell, I think.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting game against Minnesota. And then, we'll see how they fare once we get into the heart of the schedule where, we start playing the better teams in the North and then obviously in the NFC North.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how they adjust.
For sure. Yeah.
But that's going to wrap it up for us today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did. And thank you all for listening. And we will see you guys in the next one. Peace.